Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 84 of the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our media room here at the OpenStack Summit in Portland, and we are joined this morning by Diane Mueller. Diane, say hey.
Hello, everybody.
And Krishna Raman.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm gonna attempt to pronounce it here, Ryan Jarvinen.
That's me. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
So what I wanted to do real quickly is have y'all briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll kind of jump into the first topic. So, Diane, go ahead.
Cool. Well, I'm now the Cloud Ecosystem Evangelist here at RedHat, and I'm working on developing the Origin, which is the open source side of OpenShift, creating the developer community and evangelizing and creating a stronger, more powerful community around the Origin project so that it can upstream nicely into all kinds of things.
And do you have your first month in yet?
Just barely, and during that first month, I actually took 2 weeks vacation, so hence and therefore I have my colleagues here with me to make sure I say all the names of everything correctly.
Sure, understand. Krishna.
I'm one of the engineers on the OpenShift project, and I'm leading the open source effort, which is OpenShift Origin, along with Buildcast.
Very cool. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm an evangelist for the OpenShift team, helping getting the word out about what you can do with platform as a service on top of OpenStack.
Very cool. And yeah, quick warning to everyone, even though this is the OpenStack Summit, this particular podcast will be very platform as a service heavy, but we will be also digging into OpenStack on top, our platform as a service and OpenShift on top of OpenStack as well. What I wanted to talk about first, Diane, was there was actually a community day the day before the summit. So
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about that.
That was a lot of fun. It was the first actual community day for Origin. We had it here in Portland, and we did a session from, it started at 11 in the morning, and then it went until 10 o'clock at night. So we did deep dives into Origin internals, running Origin on OpenStack. We did a lot of deep dives. So we had Dan Walsh, an SE Linux guru, talking about the benefits of SE Linux, where we're going with it, why you want to secure your PaaS. That was pretty cool. And then we had a really great session on cartridges, and cartridges is our metaphor for how we extend and add new services and frameworks and pieces to the platform as a service, and we have a new architecture that came out. So once we went through all of that, then we had beer and pretty good pizza and a little hackathon, and we made a few people sit down and start writing some cartridges. So it was a pretty wonderful day. We had about 40 to 45 people show up, and it was one of those moments in time that I think we'll all remember is the first actual community day.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit about the community and platform as a service in general.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we're all seeing, and we're here at OpenStack, so obviously a lot of us are into open source, is that platform as a service now is really moving into becoming one of the key layers of the cloud, and it's becoming a very integral open source project. And I think what we're seeing is groups coalescing around platform as a service and starting to really want to contribute to creating the next generation of platform as a service, and that's what we really see OpenShift as. It's an evolving architecture. We've got a lot of great folks from RedHat working on it. We've got a lot of external folks working on it too, and I think what we're really, the issues that we're running into overall in the cloud, like we discussed with OpenStack and every other one, is around governance and transparency, and we're working out the whole process of being a contributor and committing. And that, I think, is what we're focusing on overall in the PaaS space. Historically, we had, wonderful people like Heroku and Engine Yard and .cloud, and there's great public PaaS offerings, but they're all built built on pieces and parts of open source projects, but they in themselves were not open source.
Right, as a whole project
and then,
or offering.
Yeah, they weren't. They're not an offering. And then as the private cloud has evolved and people want to bring it on premise or host it privately themselves on some public cloud, we've started to see some proprietary options open. But I think really as the open source ethos has really become that of the corporate world too, it's really been adopted, is that we really are seeing that platform as a service itself is something that people expect to be an open source initiative. They don't expect to be deploying a proprietary initiative in-house, or even a few companies we see try to build their own platform as a service and then they turf it because they realize it's a maintenance nightmare. And, or
Sure.
a few companies fork an open source project and then they realize, oh no, we better play well with others and merge it back in and contribute and collaborate. And that's really what I think it's a learning curve. Well, people realize that platform as a service is one of those essential cogs that must be an open source project.
Sure. And, we keep hearing over and over, all of this is in early days. Like you mentioned, this is the first community day, right? But at the same time, like to kind of circle back around to a previous Cloudcast, we had Isaac Roth on way back when. I want to say July 2011, if I remember, episode 13. The project and the platform really has come a long way. Yeah. But what kind of traction are you seeing in the industry, from the users that are out there?
We're actually in a really sweet spot, as far as platform as a service goes, because we have the online community of people, and there's hundreds of thousands of folks using and giving us feedback and pounding it. So we come from a very strong, as opposed to just creating an open source project and, okay, here it is, come play with me.
Yep.
We have a huge user base who have been already playing with and building cartridges for and giving us feedback so that we can change the core, change the architecture, extend things, and make it actually scale and do wonderful things. So we've got a real tipping point of people who want to work on it. So I think that's key for our success.
Sure. And I would kind of relate that back to this conference in general. It certainly seems like OpenStack has received a critical mass at this point, right? I think actually maybe it was Randy Bias. I don't remember who, but there was a Twitter comment from one of the sessions. I wasn't in the session, but that, the soundbite was that, as of this summit, that OpenStack has certainly received critical mass at this point. I thought that was an interesting comment.
Critical mass isn't always the tipping point for a project, though.
Sure.
It is, and one of the things that I'm really clear on is that open source isn't always a popularity contest. So,
right.
I love, and I've deployed, since Essex and Folsom, I've been playing with OpenStack and deployed a number of times in lots of different scenarios. And so I think it's a very strong, and so I definitely agree with Randy that we have with OpenStack on that. I think with platform as a service, the tipping point hasn't been hit yet.
Mm-hmm.
For us, Community Day happened because we had our first release of Origin.
Right. Sure.
And it had been in use for a lot longer.
Yep.
But it was the actual first official release of Origin, which was pretty cool.
Yep.
And so we decided to have a Community Day around that.
Cool. So Ryan, Krishna, tell me a little bit about Origin. What is it? How does it compare to some of the other things you have going? And historically, what has happened with OpenShift Origin?
Sure. So since the last podcast that you had,
mm-hmm.
a lot has changed. So back then, if I remember right, there were two products. There was OpenShift Flex and OpenShift Express.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, the code bases have actually been combined. Flex was written in Java. Express was a combination of Ruby and Bash.
Okay.
And now both of those have been combined, and we have Origin, or OpenShift as it is today.
Sure.
Right. Origin is the upstream product of OpenShift Online as well as Express.
Okay.
So they both pull from that, and the only difference in Online is basically integration with internal RedHat stuff. So it's really running the same code.
Okay.
Except for a couple of plugins, right? So that's a very brief history of where OpenShift came from. Origin itself was announced about a year ago at Red Hat Summit. And since then, we have been making a lot of changes just to have a public CI out there. All the code is now on GitHub. There's open source Puppet script that you can use to set up Origin.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the Vagrant startup, which it pulls the latest nightly builds to run and get everything up and going really quickly. So that's where we are right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the really interesting things, and one thing I think we're really doing right with this, is having Origin be the upstream master. And there's really we're learning a lot from using OpenShift Online and doing the internal deployments with the enterprise and feeding that all back upstream. So
Sure.
I think this is one of the few areas. I don't know if Red Hat proper would say this, but I would like.
Ryan's going off message. No,
I would love it if Red Hat was not the number one contributor long term.
Sure.
In this one, we really want to bring other people
Sure.
on board.
Sure.
So to that end, one of my main focuses here is to bringing in the enterprise customers and external cloud technologists into the community. And you can always go to openshift.github.io and see all the documentation. You can download a VM from that spot, and you can pull the code and do whatever
Sure.
you want to it and play with it and contribute it. You can actually see lots of the pull requests are not coming from us or inside of Red Hat. One of the really cool things about Community Day is in that day, at the beginning of the day, one of the enterprise customers who came to that session made a pull request, and with us, in that single day, someone from the team, I think Krishna, reviewed it, put it through the testing cycle, and
it's merged.
merged
very nice.
in one day.
Yeah.
And that's what we're striving for. We're striving for the enterprise customers to come in, the people who are already using different parts of OpenShift, because we have a huge customer. We're Red Hat, okay?
Right.
I know I'm wearing not a Red Hat, but there's a huge customer base already there. But there's also a little startup in Brazil called GetUp Cloud. This is a plug for that actually took the origin code and instantiated a small public PaaS down in Brazil. So,
Sure.
We're really getting, and those guys have made pull requests, and those pull requests have also been merged and pulled in. So
Right.
we're really about making sure that this is a real, true open source project.
Right. And so OpenShift Origin is the open source project that you can just go get and get running, and like Krishna was saying. And then there is also, is it OpenShift.com is the public offering?
OpenShift Online.
OpenShift Online. Okay, thank you. So OpenShift Online is the public offering.
Yep.
And actually I've played with that. So you can go out, sign up for a free account, and you can get up to 3 micro instances.
Yeah.
So actually, I got, this was actually, I was on spring break with my kids, and, after everyone would go to bed at night, I'd stay up and do this. So this was my, spring break project. Mm-hmm. But I got the tiny RSS reader going as a potential Google Reader alternative. That was actually it was one of the quick starts that you could just go do, right? Yeah. I did that, and I did a WordPress one, and it was just really fun. And the other one was, there was I just thought it was the coolest thing. There was the Minecraft server that you had met. I think was it you, Ryan, that mentioned? Steve, yeah. So there was I didn't do that one yet, although I'm sure my kids would love that. But there was, for me, I'm an old gamer, so there was a Quake 2. Yeah. I want to get Quake 2 running yet as my third micro instance. Awesome. I haven't done it yet, but I'll let you know when I get Quake 2 running.
and those go up incredibly quick, especially if you have something packaged as a quick start, something that's already had a couple minor modifications so that the application can bind to the correct ports.
Yep.
And usually that's the only changes from a developer's perspective that are needed to port your application to something where a developer could come along and basically say, start me up a new app. Here's the source on GitHub or another public Git repo.
Yep.
And boom, you're ready to go. And that's kind of our quick start level, instant app. And, and then the other major place for contributors to come in is at the cartridge level. Mm-hmm. And that's the main point for partners to come in.
And a cartridge is, in my mind, it's almost like a library, right? Where it's like a pre-configured, like what were some of these? What are the examples of some of the popular cartridges, right? Where it's you're basically pulling something in that's pre-configured, so you don't have to mess with it, right?
Right. I would think of it as a component that plugs in and gives you some sort of feature in your application. So a cartridge could be a language, like a Java, Ruby Python, all of those are there.
Yep.
It could also be a database. It could be a message queue. It's basically any component that's reusable between applications.
Okay.
And can be plugged into an application to provide some feature to it.
Gotcha. And so there's the OpenShift, which is the community. Right. There's OpenShift Online, which is the public version, and then there is a private cloud version as well, or is that coming?
Right, that
or
is OpenShift Enterprise.
Okay, OpenShift Enterprise. Okay,
already launched.
Okay, so that's already launched. All right, so
the Enterprise is
there you go. Right. So there is, there's certainly various different versions, right? But there's the open source version, there's the public version, there's the private version for the enterprise. There's a little bit of everything and anything. And what I really found fascinating, again, going back to that cartridge aspect of it, that idea of, all right, write it once, use it many times kind of philosophy behind all of it.
It gives a great way to extend the platform. I think that's one of the keys to this architecture is that it really gives. There's lots of places you can give contributions in lots of places, but cartridges really allows us to extend the frameworks that we support, the languages, the message buses thing. It really allows us to bring in partners. We had a couple of them at the community day as well, hacking away, trying to get bits and pieces running. So I think we have 2 that will come out shortly that'll be community cartridges, and we'll be making a lot of noise about that. That'll be fun.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit about the architecture itself, because when I was playing around with it, so those 3 micro instances that I could launch, it was all single instance, no HA or any of that, but there's an HA architecture available as well for that more scalable application. So there's like, think a micro instance and then a slightly larger instance, and then is there plans for more as time goes on, or?
I'm not sure, but that would be more on the online aspect.
Yes.
But the platform itself is capable of supporting any size that you require.
Okay.
So the small size instances with OpenShift Online are 512 megs of memory and a gig of persistent disk space for our smalls, right? But that's really tunable. If you're running your own private cloud, you could really tweak those however you want.
Right, you set your own. Okay,
yeah.
It's your own offerings of whatever instance size you want, right? So how does the HA architecture work then? What's behind the scenes on that?
At this point in time, the way it works is there's a HA proxy up front, which is the load balancer, and your application gear, so basically a language tier, is the one that scales up and down.
Okay.
And you have multiple gears within your application. So if you have a non-scaled application, it's a single gear. But if you just pass the -s flag when you're creating it on command line, that makes it a scalable application. Okay. And as soon as you do that, you now have multiple gears within your application. The first one being HA proxy, and it will spin up additional gears as the load goes up and scale out your application to it.
Okay.
And that'll scale across your OpenStack cluster, right? Okay. So you really can, spread applications, across your whole private cloud,
right?
And do a lot of stuff that you'd expect from, like a Heroku type service.
Understand. And I've heard references to this running on top of OpenStack, and I've also heard references to SE Linux. So tell me a little bit about the infrastructure as a service layer, or a little bit about what it actually runs on top of, and maybe clarify that a little bit for me.
Sure. So OpenShift Origin itself can run on anything that will run RHEL or Fedora 18.
Okay.
It doesn't require a platform or an infrastructure as a service under it. It will run on bare metal if you'd like. Right? Okay. But it fits into OpenStack quite nicely because OpenStack will allow you to spin up additional nodes to provide more capacity as you need it.
Okay.
And that's basically the point where Heat comes in. So Heat is an API that's coming into OpenStack. A lot of discussion in this particular conference about it. And we have a Heat template that was released recently, which spins up a broker and a node in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Which is pretty awesome in terms of automating and orchestrating deploying the PaaS.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things that we're really looking forward to on the OpenStack is that tighter integration using Heat, and we're making sure that across all of the different deployments, the different flavors of OpenStack that are out there, the ability to use Heat to do the orchestration to deploy a PaaS such as OpenShift is going to be pretty cool.
Yes.
And again, I'll say at openshift.github.io, you can go and you can actually get the public scripts that we use, and I think the Heat
template is checked into the Heat project, which is part of OpenStack.
Okay.
And basically, you can go off if you have an OpenStack instantiation or a cluster somewhere, and you've got the Heat stuff. And we actually, in the video that we made, show you how to get Heat up and running. Yep. So that's I think, and we'll give you the link
sure.
to that.
Yeah, and you did your session yesterday. It was Krishna and Diane, and it was actually so well attended. I was in the overflow actually sitting next to Ryan. And it was a really good crowd, and we ended up in the overflow room when we saw the video and heard y'all, and but it was really neat to actually see all of that.
I think that the interesting thing is at the beginning of that session, because you were in the overflow, I asked everybody in the room who there had used a PaaS. And the question I should have asked is, okay, so now who has deployed a PaaS on OpenStack? Because they all want PaaS, right? I think the one thing that I'm really clear on now is that any cloud initiative, whether it's a private cloud initiative or a public cloud, if it doesn't include a PaaS, it's basically incomplete functionality. Mm-hmm. Because the expectations there now, and this is what has happened in the marketplace, is that the early day guys like Heroku and Engine Yard and all those the goodness that was in the public made an expectation that if you deploy a private cloud and then you bring the developers to it, they expect PaaS functionality to be there now. Mm-hmm. And so the one piece of advice I keep doing is that the only way you're going to be successful on a private cloud project is if you include a platform as a service layer there, because it's just basically functionality. We expect it now.
Sure. And tell me a little bit about use cases, because everyone, whenever you think about platform as a service, everyone immediately goes, yep, it's developers, is this, is that, Are we still at that same kind of initial set of use cases, or as we're maturing, the product's maturing, are we seeing a little bit of growth outside of that?
So I think initially the use case with the public PaaSes were developers who were tired of waiting for ops to build them a stack or give them permission to have a stack and went around. There were a lot of shadow IT things happening, and so there was a lot of FUD around that. But I think
me building my Quake server,
building your Quake server, or worse yet, you building a mobile app for your Salesforce,
right?
Instead of using Salesforce or whatever the corporate ethos was that you had to use. But I think now what we're seeing is more from a DevOps push and an IT management push, and even a compliance push. Because if you think about what PaaS is, it's basically saying you can use these cartridges. You can use these gears, you can use these frameworks, you can use this version of this framework, and we will let you push your app out there. And so you now can audit it, you can do risk management around it. I know all those words are very boring to people, but when you're in the business of IT, right. Those things are really essential.
It's on the enterprise checklist.
It's on the enterprise checklist.
Right.
And PaaS is really helping people to be more compliant and more secure, and I think that's a really good thing. Aside a new use case that we didn't think of initially, I also think that because of the way that there was one question in yesterday's session where someone was asking, so what's the difference between just using Heat to deploy WordPress or using Heat to deploy PaaS and then using, doing your WordPress?
I remember that, yes.
And I'm like thinking to myself, God, if I have to use Heat to deploy every application I ever do, it's a maintenance nightmare. That many templates. But the thing is, if you just have the platform as a service, we should stop using WordPress as an example because it's really like the biggest. I love WordPress. Sorry, it's the biggest waste of time in terms of trying to explain what PaaS is good for. Because you asked about use cases besides in the IT stuff. Right now, what I'm really seeing is a lot of mobile apps going out there and using. And I this was tweeted out yesterday. I'll probably repeat myself again. But BaaS, backend as a service, the world's worst acronym ever.
Right. Yes.
But one of the perfect use cases that I've been playing with a lot lately, because I've got a couple of iPhone apps out there, is using PaaS to manage the scaling of the back end of my mobile applications that are out there. And I think that's a really cool application that people, and a lot of that, besides the Apple Store giving us a place to sell things, that's really enabled people to put applications out there in the world, and it's really gotten a lot of innovation going on.
Sure.
It's not just about, Angry Birds.
Right. Yeah. And to kind of circle it back around at the Cloudcast, we just launched a couple episodes ago another podcast that's actually in our feed called the Mobilecast, because we were, doing a lot of things, and we noticed there was a lot of interest in the mobility, and we actually had some really good guests on, and they actually agreed to kind of take it on as another podcast in our feed. So we're starting to kind of branch out because, that is the number one use case we're seeing a lot of times these days.
Well, it's actually probably the safest place for big enterprises to try to dip their toe in the water. Yeah. So you'll see them, in a field or a tech service, some mobile app, they'll tie it to their secure database, but they'll create a web front end for it and make it do their checklist when they're going off to fix a machine in somebody's factory or whatever. And that's a great way to test the waters with cloud and to test the waters with PaaS. So I think that's why I keep writing great demo apps for this sort of and that sort of use case.
Sure. So what I want to do is kind of do a quick summary, and then let's talk about some of the other OpenStack related things. But so there is OpenShift Online, but OpenShift Online is in developer preview. Is that the correct term to use for it? Where
currently, yeah, I think, and that preview is supposed to extend up until this summer.
Okay.
And I expect there to be some kind of announcement upcoming.
Sure. You guys might have a conference coming up where possibly, you might want to.
Yeah, there may.
Okay.
Just a little one in June.
And then of course, the OpenShift Origin project is already up and going, and the enterprise version of the product is released today and available. Is that correct?
It's released today, and it's in production in a couple of really nice large companies that we can't say any names.
Of course.
Shot. But they were at the community day. So
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and since we're here at the OpenStack Summit, and Diane, I know that is at least part of your role as well. Tell me a little bit. There was some interesting announcements yesterday around OpenStack, and tell me a little bit about that.
So I think one of the big things, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that RedHat has made a concerted effort to do a lot of contributions into the OpenStack. And Steve Hardy is doing a lot of work with Heat, and we've been playing a lot with him. And you'll see, if you walk out there, it's not just the lanyards that have RedHat on them, but the hats are out. There's a sea of red fedoras, and what we're really proud of is having RDO, which is the Red Hat distribution of OpenStack, and the work that's being done on that. And that's some of the announcements here, and the announcement of that community being developed and pushing that effort out the door has been a big part of what Red Hat's been doing over the past year, and where I think you'll see a lot more coming out very shortly that I can't talk about. But so suffice to say, I think we have a very big investment in that, but I think that's all I can say.
Well, and just as a general, outside looking in, the one thing I have definitely noticed with the OpenStack Summit so far is there's definitely been a vibe around certain companies that seem to have a lot of traction and a lot of movement forward in the industry, and certainly would include y'all in that.
Yeah, so I think that the Red Hat vision is a complete cloud stack. I mean, cloud stack is somebody else's acronym, but we have the infrastructure layer, we have Manage IQ and Cloud Forms, we've got work going on with Fedora and Gluster and Overt. I mean, we're really trying to make sure that we have everything you need to instantiate a Red Hat. What was the saying last night at the party was, every cloud has a red lining, or red cloud rising or something like that. But I think that's really our vision, is this open hybrid cloud, or the convergence of public and private, and being able to have, RHEL on the inside and RDO there, and our Origin OpenShift hopefully is the PaaS layer there.
Sure. And I noticed as of Grizzly, Red Hat, is it the most contributors, most commits? There was some stats there around. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but but there was definitely some.
I think it's
a little bit of it was interesting to see the spread. And it wasn't just, it's just Rackspace, right? It seems to be opening up as a community, and Red Hat seems very involved with the OpenStack development.
That's a healthy thing.
Agreed.
I think that's really where we, and as Randy had said, we've hit a tipping point, critical mass, maybe. I'm thinking we're getting there, but I think there's also a lot of OpenStack and open cloud initiatives at a lot of enterprises right now that are really taking it, and they're here this week. Taking a very close look at OpenStack and starting to deploy it.
Sure. And the one thing that I guess maybe if you follow some of the analysts on Twitter, they had the analyst day yesterday, and the one thing I will bring up is apparently they were pretty brutal on Jonathan in the analyst day. There was nothing anyone wanted to willingly admit publicly, but a lot of questions around. At what point does it get to be too many distributions? And is that a good thing, and is that a bad thing?
Well, as we watched Linux grow up, we know that there will be a winnowing of the field at some point.
Is this history repeating itself?
I think so. In my humble opinion, I think so. I think, and I think one of the Red Hat advantages is we've learned from experience how to work well with open source and community, and to be diplomatic when we need to collaborate when we need to, but also to provide the technical support and the solution architects to make sure that everything works in place. And, I was just in Tyson Corner a couple weeks ago with solution architects from Red Hat, and they are just chomping at the bit to get a Red Hat solution to go out and take and give to people. It's like, give it to me.
Right.
And I think what you're going to see is there'll be lots of distributions. I like some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that Mirantis is doing is absolutely the coolness. Being able to take a rack and just shove it in your server room, and it's already up and running with OpenStack. That's just the coolness. That's just great. And I think a lot of that stuff's it has to happen.
Sure.
It has to be ready to run OpenStack.
Yes.
Kind of stuff.
Are we? So there's certain points of the industry. If you do too much splitting too early on, you end up almost fracturing the progress. But at the same time, at some point, all of that is healthy competition, right? And so where's the balance between?
Well, I think that for me, interoperability is the issue. It's not about having too many. It's having too many flavors that are not interoperable. And I think that's what the issue was that came out. I don't care if there's 2,000 distributions of OpenStack, as long as they're all interoperable. And I think that's the thing. That's where the struggle comes in. And yes, some people are going to have to tweak it to run on their hardware or their, in their instantiation of elastic compute and whatever it is that they're doing. But if I can't run my flavor of the PaaS or my application because there's something specific, or I can't get to the database, my database, or the storage isn't working the same way from one cloud, then we lose as a community. So I think the key here is not the number of distributions; it's interoperability, as it is always with everything.
Sure. Great point. And so with that, I think we're going to close it up. So we are out of time for this week. Diane, Ryan, Krishna, where can everyone get started with either the OpenStack products, OpenShift products, find more information about y'all?
OpenShift.github.io is the best place to start with OpenShift Origin, and that will include links to getting started with the Origin on bare metal or on OpenStack. And the commits, the templates for Heat and the JEOS required are already up as pull requests. I think the Heat template is actually being merged in. So as soon as that's up, everyone will be able to use it as well.
We also have a live CD you could download, virtual machines, and instructions on how to build your own cartridge if you wanted to be a partner down the road.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we're really looking forward to hearing everybody's feedback, especially on the Heat stuff. I want to see OpenShift Origin, OpenShift Enterprise, whatever it is you want to run. But I want to see it on every instantiation of OpenStack that's out there. And I challenge you all to come and give it a try and give us some feedback. So And we're always around on IRC, on our IRC OpenShift Dev channel. So we live and breathe on IRC.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. So if you like the show, please tell a friend, or leave us a review on iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at TheCloudcastNet, or on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you can find links to everything Cloudcast. Thanks for listening.